It's another glorious Sunday here in the Abyss. Thank you for joining us again this week. We definitely appreciate it. We have some pretty crazy stories to talk about today.
We're going to talk about men who wouldn't die.
Exactly. People who were just cheating death left and right. I mean, if death comes for all of us, but for these two gentlemen, it wasn't so easy.
They pushed death back out the door. Tonight, I'll be talking about Rasputin.
And I'm going to be talking about a gentleman by the name of Michael Malloy. Now, Michael Malloy was actually introduced to me. The story was introduced to me by my wife, who had actually heard it on another podcast. And I looked into it because I didn't quite believe at how crazy this thing was. And in doing research, it's legit and it's really intense. So I'm actually really excited to tell you about this story. It's one of my favorites. Now, Michael Malloy was an Irishman who lived in New York during the 1920s and 30s. He became notorious for surviving numerous attempts of murder and would go on to earn several nicknames such as Mike the Durable, Iron Mike, Irish Rasputin, so that's a direct title.
Oh, wow.
And the Juggernaut. And if there's one certainty in our lives, like we said, it is death, and he proved that it might take more than what you might think.
Just by his nicknames, I wouldn't want to run into that guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty cool, though. I feel bad for him once we read this story here. So it starts in January of 1933. Now, Malloy, again, he's an Irishman, but he was also a really big alcoholic. He was homeless. He was an unemployed man who frequents a speakeasy by the name of Marino's, which was on 3rd Avenue in New York City. He would go on and take on odd jobs such as sweeping alleyways or collecting garbage. So he really wasn't a notorious person. He was just kind of someone who was just floating around. He was a retired firefighter, so he did have a pretty notorious job beforehand, but he kind of fell off the wagon and just started drinking everywhere. And, you know, some people would go on to say that he was actually okay to be paid in alcohol rather than money. So he would just go to the speakeasy and just drink all day long.
Screw getting paid in gum. Let's get paid in alcohol.
Exactly. I'm out of gum. So, I mean, it's pretty intense because, I mean, he would go every single day to the speakeasy, and he would literally, he'd walk in, he'd show up to Marino's, and he would say, "I want another morning's morning, if you don't mind." That was actually pretty good, right? That was actually not very bad. And he would literally drink until he couldn't walk out of the bar. Sometimes he would just pass out on the floor. So at this point in time, Tony Marino, who was the owner and operator of Marino's Speakeasy, was allowing Malloy to drink on credit. But eventually, because Malloy was broke, he couldn't pay the bill that he had racked up.
I want to know how much his tab was.
It's going to be pretty high up there. But he was allowing him to drink on credit, and he couldn't pay it, and it caused the speakeasy owner some pretty bad troubles, and he was actually going on to say that he might even go bankrupt because of this gentleman.
He drank him into bankruptcy?
He almost did. I mean, he was trying. I mean, he'd go from odd job to odd job and then just go to the speakeasy and drink all fucking night. Now, one afternoon, during a round of drinks at the speakeasy, a group of men by the names of Francis Pasqua, Daniel Kreisberg, and Tony Marino, who was the owner of the speakeasy, watched in bewilderment as Malloy literally was throwing drinks down his gullet like they were just going extinct. It was insane. Pasqua, at the time, who was 24 years old and was an undertaker by trade, went up to Marino and said, "Why don't you just take out an insurance on Malloy? I can take care of the rest of it."
Damn, he's going to kill him.
That's the plan, and it's kind of a far-fetched thing. I mean, you don't just walk up to someone and say, "Oh, that guy, he's a piece of shit. Take out an insurance policy on him." Doesn't work that well.
What are you, H.H. Holmes?
Yeah, H.H. Holmes, like we talked about, that poor bastard. So they're literally just watching him drink, and he's saying, "Hey, I'll take care of the rest. Just open up an insurance policy. We'll get rid of this guy." Now, there's a reason he mentioned this, because Pasqua found out that the speakeasy owner had actually done something similar in the year before. So Marino, 27 years old at the time, had made friends with a homeless woman by the name of Mabel Carson. He'd actually become so close to her that he had convinced her to take out a life insurance policy in the amount of $2,000 and named him the sole beneficiary.
Can we just talk to our viewers with our previous episodes? If anyone asks you to take out a life insurance policy and put them as a beneficiary, just say no.
Just like it's like the DARE program. Just say no. Because it's never a good thing. "Hey, buddy, you sign this paper. I'm going to be your sole beneficiary."
They never have your best interests at heart.
Well, they might. You never know. This gentleman did not. So with Mabel, unfortunately, you know, she signed the paperwork. Now, on a freezing cold night in the middle of winter, he served her enough alcohol to knock her on her ass. He then stripped her naked, doused her, the sheets, and her mattress with ice-cold water, and then moved the mattress beneath an open window. Her death was ruled as bronchial pneumonia by the medical examiner, and Marino made off with the money with no issues.
That's crazy to me. I would imagine the life insurance companies would have some obligation to investigate this. I mean, hopefully they've gotten better with time.
Well, I mean, in the year 2020, I would assume it's not as easy. 1933, it's like, oh, yeah, I was her good friend, and she died of pneumonia. I want all the money. Here you go.
It's like, how many plans can you cash out on, too? I mean, he's planning on doing it a second time?
Well, hey, the iron strikes hot twice, right? So, at this point in time, again, Marino has allowed this guy to drink on credit over and over. So, he just looks over at Malloy, just drinking over and over, and he agrees. And he says, okay, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and take care of it. Now, Pasqua and Marino, they looked over to the man named Daniel Kreisberg, who was a 29-year-old grocer and father of 3, who nodded in agreement, but would later state he was only in it for the sake of his family. Like, I don't know how that could be for the sake of your family, just, I guess, for the money aspect. So, at this point in time, they're kind of building this coup against Michael Malloy to try and kill him. The group also included some of Marino's regulars who were also petty criminals by the names of John McNally, Edward Tin Ear Smith, Tough Tony Bastone, and his sidekick Joseph Maglione. So it's a really big group of people who really want this guy dead. They formed the gang, which would go on to be called the Murder Trust, and began their plot against Malloy.
It's not looking good for him.
There's a lot of people who want this one guy dead solely because he just comes in and drinks all the time. Now, he has no family or friends to speak of. He's just this loner guy, and down on his luck, he's really poor, just comes in to drink. And they're like, hey, let's just profit off this guy. Why not? Makes perfect sense.
It's a win-win.
So at this point in time, plans are setting in motion, and Pasqua offered to take care of the finer details and work through the insurance piece himself. This is where he enlisted the help of a crooked insurance agent who went by the name of Nicholas Malloy. He would go on to say that he was Malloy's next of kin to receive the payout. So he successfully opened up 3 life insurance policies, and if they were able to actually pull it off, each member would walk away with roughly $3,756, which is equal to roughly $65,000 in today's standards.
It's not bad.
No, and that's split up between, 6 or 7 of them at this point in time? All they had to do now was have Michael Malloy sign off on said insurance policies, which came easily enough because Marino then gave Malloy an unlimited, open-ended bar tab, which made it a no-brainer for him to sign away the insurance policy.
So let me get this straight. So he was at the bar, and the guy's just like, hey, sign these 6 life insurance policies, and you can drink forever, and he signed it?
Yeah, and he was already drunk at the time. I mean, he's been here drinking. So you walk up and you say, dude, I've got these papers. You sign these, unlimited drinks. Whiskey for days,
You
brother.
gotta know that's not gonna end well.
Yeah, it doesn't. But hey, guess what? He signs them. He signs away, and now with the paper signed, the only thing left to do was to kill Malloy and claim the money. Now, this is where the fun begins for the group because he earned his nicknames for a reason, so let's jump into what happened here. So now, with having an unlimited bar tab to play with, Marino thought that Malloy would simply drink himself to death, as he was already in rough shape. I mean, he was drinking every single night. I mean, it's not going to be long before he drinks himself to death, right?
I bet that they were saying that to themselves to make them feel better. And then they just knew in the end they were actually going to have to kill him.
Yeah. Like, oh, we're doing him a favor. He's going to drop it anyway. Might as well just profit off of it. So they're thinking it's not going to take long for the alcohol to claim his life, or so they thought. Marino had a hard time keeping Malloy's glass full as he was just continuing to just throw these things back. And he said his arm was getting tired. It was like a continuous waterfall of whiskey for Malloy. And he's just like shooting these things back. It's insane. Just drinking and drinking and drinking, as if his life depended on it. No pun intended. Now, Malloy would drink until he physically couldn't drink anymore and would leave, stating that he would return the next day. And for 3 days after, he did in fact return day after day, just drinking as much as the night beforehand, stating, "Boy, ain't I got a thirst."
Man, I generally like this guy.
Yeah, he sounds like an awesome guy. You feel bad that people are trying to kill him just because he's an alcoholic. So at this point in time, Tough Tony was getting impatient and had suggested simply shooting Malloy in the head. I mean, this guy he's not drinking enough to kill himself. He's like, this isn't working. Let's just shoot him and get it over with. But Murphy suggested a simpler plan. They would get him drunk on whiskey and would switch the liquor with poison.
The old Rasputin switch.
Some sources say that Marino would switch his drink with antifreeze, then turpentine, and finally using horse liniment with rat poison mixed into it.
So it wasn't just like straight up like rat poison. It was just mixed in the whiskey,
It was mixed in at first, right?
Okay.
He's just doing like little cocktails of whiskey and rat poison. I mean, that's going to do the trick. I mean, you would think. Other sources were actually stating that he would use wood alcohol, which with even the smallest dose can cause blindness. Even if you ingest a small amount, you can go blind from drinking wood alcohol. After loosening Malloy up with his regular old whiskey, the substitutions began. Eventually, because they were mixing it and he was still drinking them like nothing's going on, eventually they were just pouring 100% wood alcohol into his glasses. Now,
he didn't notice the flavor.
he didn't notice. He's that drunk that he didn't notice that instead of whiskey, he's drinking wood alcohol at this point. It's straight up poison. And you think anyone else, you're going to drop dead after half a glass. No, he's shooting 100% wood alcohol at this point in time. And he didn't notice. He would just continue to chug away happily night after night. One night, however, he did collapse to the floor after several shots. So the whole place just grows quiet. They're all looking over him. He's on the floor. Pasqua goes to, look over and check his pulse. And he has a very faint pulse. And they're thinking, okay, we've done it. He's dead. And he takes like one big like gurgled breath. And they're like, okay, this is the last one. Like the death rattle breath, right? The one's like, oh.
Yeah, he's going to die.
Yeah. So what does he do? He starts snoring. He just goes to sleep. Doesn't die. Just starts to snore away on the floor. Now, several hours later, he wakes up and he says, give me some of the old regular, me lad.
The guy, does he even drink water at this point, or does he just drink whiskey?
Oh, it's just straight whiskey. I don't think water's even in his vocabulary. So between his drinking frenzies, he would accept the complimentary oyster sandwiches, which sounds god-awful to me. I mean, I've never had an oyster before, but an oyster sandwich, that sounds like shit.
It's very chewy, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, but they were complimentary, I guess, and he would take them in between his drinking sprees and then would continue going on. Now, after several nights of his endless drinking, the Trust knew that they had to step up their game. This just was not working. They eventually started to poison the oysters by letting them sit in wood alcohol for days on end before then putting them in the sandwich. Because drinking straight wood alcohol isn't going to work, so let's just poison oysters with it. I mean, he's ingesting it at this point.
They're really set on poisoning this guy, but I guess it makes sense. They can't just shoot him and collect the life insurance policy.
Right. It has to be kind of like an accidental death. Kind of like if you shoot him, it's like, oh, that's suspicious. Not that it's his third or fourth life insurance policy this guy's fucking taking out on people. So he's eating these sandwiches, he's putting them back, and he's not complaining. They're poisoned oysters. And he's like, oh, I'll have another one. Sure, just keep on bringing them through. Malloy ate the whole sandwich, let out a burp, and then even asked for a second one. So the next sandwich, he's like, okay, leaving them in wood alcohol is not enough. We're going to let this can rot for a week. So he leaves an open can of oysters out to rot. Now in this one, he puts it in the sandwich. Then he starts to put in glass shavings into the sandwich, carpet tacks, and finely ground shavings from the sardine can.
At what point does he not know that they're trying to kill him?
I can only imagine he's just in this blissfully ignorant, drunken stupor. He's just chewing through glass like, yeah, this oyster's a little crunchy. It hurts my gums a little bit, and it hurts to swallow. But, it's great. The fix for that is whiskey.
Whiskey.
So Malloy ate the sandwich happily and continued his shots of wood alcohol as if nothing was wrong. So he's eating poison sandwiches. He's drinking straight poison. And he's still going. Nothing is changing this guy's attitude. At this point in time, the murder trust, they're pissed off at this point in time because he is not dying. Between the insurance premiums and the open bar tab, the wood alcohol, this thing is just getting expensive. It's starting to become rather tedious. Marino began to worry again that his speakeasy would eventually go bankrupt and was starting to have second thoughts on the whole thing.
I'm going to drink your bar into the ground.
I want to know how much whiskey he went through. And then wood alcohol is probably pretty expensive. If you're not shooting whiskey, it's just straight wood alcohol. You're spending so much money between the insurance premiums and you're paying to kill this guy to get money. It's backwards at this point. Once again, Tough Tony suggested that they simply shoot him and be done with it. He's done with this whole thing. This notion was again dismissed and another idea was presented. Why not ice him out like the gal before and let him, freeze to death in this cold winter month? Poisoning's not working, drinking's not working. We're going to try a little bit something different. I mean, with a guy who's just drinking and eating poison, I mean, you've got to resort to something different. So Marino had a history of freezing this gal to death before, so they kind of take a similar approach. But you can't just freeze him in his right mind. So again, they start with the whiskey. They're getting him buttered up. They switch to the wood alcohol again. They get him blitzed off his ass. He passes out. They load him up to the car, and they drive him for a couple blocks to Crotona Park. Now, they carried him through feet of snow and then removed his shirt. They then continued to dump 5 gallons of water all over his chest and his head, and he's not stirring at all. He's just snoring through this, drunk off his ass. He's just having water dumped all over him, and it's freezing cold outside. And so they dump all this water on him, and they leave him on a park bench and leave him to die. They drive back. They're like, okay, we're done. This is it. Why didn't we do this beforehand?
You know in the movies where they're like, walk towards the white light?
Yeah.
So I bet your guy was about to die, and he was looking at that bright light, and he's like, no, I'm going to stay here and drink more whiskey.
At which point, though, I think he's seen this white light like 7 times. I mean, I think he's been knocking on death's doorstep for a while, but I think he sees the light, and then something just rips him back in there. You're not ready for this, buddy. But I agree. I mean, this guy, he's something's looking out for him. I swear to God, he should die. So they leave him in the cold, thinking he's going to freeze to death, obviously. So next morning, Marino goes back to his speakeasy. He opens up, and he finds Malloy asleep in the basement, complaining of a wee chill that he had had the night before.
A wee chill?
A wee chill. Just a small one, not a big one or anything, not like death freezing, just a small one. So he trudged his way through the snow, found his way back to the speakeasy, where he's basically living at this point, broke in, fell asleep in the basement, and was just ready to go that next day.
Feels like he's almost profiting off this deal.
Oh, I think he is too. I mean, think about it. If he's already on his way to death, he's getting unlimited alcohol. Well, he was getting unlimited whiskey. Now it's just wood whiskey or wood poison, whatever the hell it is. I mean, it's not a good deal. And he almost got frozen to death. So at this point in time, they're approaching the month of February, which means that another insurance payment is due. The group is freaking out. They're saying, we're getting to a point where we're not going to be profiting off this. We're going to be losing money. John McNally, getting frustrated at Malloy's lack of dying, suggested that they run him over with a car, right? Because that can be played off as an accident, right? Oh, we saw him get struck and killed.
The old hit and run.
The murder trust agreed and enlisted the help of a friend by the name of Harry Green, a cab driver whose cut of the insurance would come to $150. They once again allowed Malloy to drink himself to unconsciousness, loaded him into Green's cab, and drove a few blocks away from the speakeasy. Now, Bastone and Murphy dragged Malloy out of the car and held him up in the street crucifixion style by his arms. Green then drove down the street, flipped around, and was just preparing to just barrel right into Malloy. He's gunning it, but he was told to stop because someone saw a flash of light out of the corner of his eye, so he slams on the brakes. Turns out that the flash of light was just a woman in her apartment turning her bedroom light on.
Thank God.
Thank God for that woman turning her light on. I mean, lights are underrated. Green doubled back and prepared for round 2. Now, this is the weird part because he went back and Malloy was able to jump out of the way of the vehicle not once, but 2 times. So I think he's sobering up enough to realize that a vehicle is quickly approaching him, and he's like, nah, not going to happen.
Or maybe he has like drunk superpowers.
Yeah, just flipping around. He's Superman, I think, something like that. Green at this point, the cab driver's getting super frustrated. He's tried to hit this guy 3 times and it's not happening. So on his 4th attempt, he's balls to the wall, man. He's going all out. So he literally flies towards Malloy at a whopping 50 miles an hour. So he hits him and just launches him right over the car, just head over feet, right over it, landing in the street. And he wants to make sure that Malloy is actually dead. So what does he do? He pops that sucker into reverse and backs over Malloy into the street. Now they're thinking, okay,
he's got to be dead.
He's got to be dead. You would think. So a nearby passing car scared him away, so they just peeled out of there. They didn't go back to check on Malloy. So we don't know. They hit him once, they hit him twice, they sped off. So they're all at the speakeasy the next day, and they're preparing to see him come in. Michael Malloy does not come into the speakeasy. So they're going, oh shit, we might have actually pulled this off. All we needed to do was hit the guy with a car. And so all day, never comes in the door. Next day, same thing, doesn't come through to the speakeasy. So now they're going, okay, well, we've done it. So at this point in time, Joseph Murphy, again, the guy who was claiming to be Mallory's brother, was supposed to call around to hospitals and morgues to try and find his missing sibling, with the air quotes. After all the calls to the hospitals and morgues, not a single one of them had Malloy in their possession. So no hospitals, no morgues. There was also no reports of any fatal accidents being reported. So now they're going, well, we hit him and he's gone now. Like, he's not at the speakeasy. He's not in the hospitals. He's not anywhere else. Where the hell did he go? Now, 5 days later, as they were planning on killing another drunk person to pass him off as Malloy, because they now want the money that bad, they're just trying to find any drunk person coming through.
This is straight up H.H. Holmes stuff.
Exactly. So again, 5 days later after hitting him, guess who comes through the door?
Malloy.
Michael fucking Malloy comes plowing through the door. He looks battered and bruised. And he apparently has a fractured skull and a broken shoulder. He comes hobbling in. He looks he looks like shit, like he got hit by a car. And what does he say, Cleet?
Nothing a shot of whiskey won't fix.
I wish he said that. It sounds a little cooler. But he says, I sure am dying for a drink. I mean, this guy ain't dying for anything. He's not dying for a drink, but shit, he will try. So, God, they hit him with the car and everything. So he has surpassed every attempt against his life that he can possibly think of. However, Michael Malloy didn't end up getting killed. And we've hit that point in the story. I'm really sad. I feel for this guy, man. I wanted Michael Malloy to pull through. I mean, this poor bastard just wants to drink. Let the guy go. So on February 21st, year 1933, a whole 7 months after the murder trust was formed, they finally murdered Michael Malloy. After once again getting Malloy drunk, they brought him to a tenement room near 168th Street. They put one end of a rubber gas tube from a gas light into his mouth and tightly wrapped a towel around his face, poisoning him with carbon monoxide.
I want to know if they got the insurance money.
We're going to get to that point. We're almost there. A friend by the name of Dr. Frank Manzella, a crooked friend of Pasqua's, filed a phony death certificate claiming Malloy died of lobar pneumonia, which is a crock of shit. He died of carbon monoxide poisoning. At this point in time, the gang only received an $800 payout from Prudential Life Insurance. In order for the policy to be legitimized, the insurance agency wanted to see Michael Malloy's body. So they're actually asking for proof at this point.
Thank God.
It's not just like, oh, here's your money. Yeah, okay, he's dead. Here you go. So they wanted to see his body. Pasqua told them that the body had already been buried. Thinking that was a little fishy, the insurance agency contacted the police, starting an investigation. And in May of 1933, Malloy's body was exhumed, and the phony death certificate was discarded, as the autopsy proved lobar pneumonia was not the cause of death. Go figure.
I'm glad that they are actually investigating this so they don't enable these fucks.
I mean, they wanted to kill another drunk person just to claim money. I mean, these guys would have kept this going, honestly. So the cab driver, Green, was unhappy with his cut of the insurance payout, so he started to talk. He was letting his lips go. He's reporting to other people. Now, this led police to find out about the woman who had died in Marino's speakeasy, with Marino claiming the life insurance policy. So again, more investigation work. It's not that hard to figure this shit out. On a separate occurrence, Tough Tony was shot dead, and Joseph Maglione was charged with the murder. With the mounting evidence against the murder trust, they were brought into the Bronx County Courthouse. At first, they all tried to plead insanity. Tell me how that makes sense. How do you claim insanity on this?
We're all crazy, man.
No, I don't get that. I mean, does the insanity plea actually ever work? Do you know of a
it
place?
Hardly ever works.
I mean,
actually.
I think they should just get rid of that. I don't see a point. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I was insane. I wasn't in my right mind. I think that makes you more of a danger.
It has its place, but the odds of the jury actually ruling in with insanity is super low.
Yeah, I don't get it. But again, I mean, they're pleading insanity. Obviously, this blew up in their faces, and they then turned on each other, implicating each other for the murder. So they're pointing fingers like, you did it, you did it, you did it. None of their pleas worked, and in June and July of 1934, Pasqua, Marino, Kreisberg, and Murphy were all sentenced to death. They were all electrocuted in Old Sparky, which is the name of the electric chair in Sing Sing prison.
No, out of all the death penalties they have out there, I think the electric chair would be the worst.
Yeah. Now get this, I mean, because I've heard of some people surviving the first couple shocks of the electric chair. Oh yeah, none of these guys survived the first one. They all died in the first one. So unlike Michael Malloy, who is cheating death, no, these guys just fried immediately from like stage one, which I think they deserved. So again, they're all killed on their first attempt. Harry Green was the only one to avoid the death sentence and instead was sent to prison. So the guy who was in it for his family, well, now he gets to see his family through a little piece of glass with a phone on the wall. So I hope it works out for him.
What a role model.
I mean, I think his kids are going to go out to say, "Oh, we want someone to disappear. We just need an insurance policy. Why not? It makes so much sense." So again, that's the story of Michael Malloy, and it's such an intense case. Not only because he was dodging death left and right, but because his murder case was actually one of the first to be investigated by the New York City Medical Examiner's Office.
That's a really cool story, Britton. I liked it a lot.
I love it. I mean, I feel bad. Again, I really feel bad for the guy. Not just because he's an Irishman, and I'm very Irish, and you're very Irish, and we've got a lot of Irish ties.
And whiskey in our blood.
Not to mention the whiskey.
All right, guys, let's transition over to Rasputin, a man who could heal people, who had beat prostitutes, and thought there was a war inside him with God and the devil.
Now that's how you start a story.
Grigori Rasputin was born on January 20th, 1869, in a Siberia village called Pokrovskoye.
That was a perfect pronunciation.
I know.
Aren't you saving up for a trip to Siberia?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I got those travel rewards points, and what better to sit out in the winter and bask in what little sun is there.
Yeah, I mean, what, you got ice skating, you've got like ice hockey, you've got ice, everything. Everything is ice.
So Rasputin actually lived in the worst part of Siberia, like really close to the North Pole, what they call it.
Yeah, where Santa lives.
Yeah, where Santa lives. This area was full of Russia's criminals, where prisoners would be in labor camps or people were exiled because of their political or religious beliefs. Rasputin's father was a peasant farmer and a courier, and his mother had 7 children who died from childbirth before Rasputin was born.
All 7?
Yeah. Rasputin was the first one to actually survive childbirth. During his youth, he would routinely speak about seeing visions of the future and visitations from angels in his dreams. It was said that he knew private facts about people in the village that couldn't have been known. This made some of the villagers view him as some type of prophet. There were stories of him healing animals by touch. People around the village started... Hang on.
I don't want him touching my animals.
People around the village started proclaiming him the second coming of Christ. Others viewed his supernatural abilities as demonic and was working with the devil. During his adolescent years, he was known as a troublemaker. During booze-filled benders, he would steal and generally just be annoying amongst his town folks. At age 28, he married and had 4 children. His reputation was that of an angry drunk and would constantly cheat on his wife.
During booze-filled benders. I like that word.
One of his more notable thefts was when he stole a horse. Now, I don't know why every time I cover somebody, they steal horses, but that seems to be a general theme in this podcast.
Who else stole a horse?
H.H. Holmes.
Oh, that's right.
That's what
Mr.
sent him to jail.
Holmes. Okay, that's right. He stole a horse. You know, I don't know. When you see a horse, it's kind of tempting to steal it.
If you guys haven't heard that episode, I strongly recommend you listen to it. Anyways, the entire village knew he stole the horse, but instead of going back to face the crime that he committed, he joined a local monastery for several months. It was at this time they convinced him to join them and change his path from villainy and find God, his mentor being Makari. This transition, his thought, was so strong that he abandoned his family to go town to town to spread the word of God. During this grand tour, he wasn't allowed to bathe, and he would sometimes wear shackles to give him pain while he walked. Not your normal missionary.
Not at all. I mean, he just comes to the door with his chains rattling. Hey, do you have a moment to talk?
I'd fucking shut my door. Get out.
But I wonder if he's going around door to door with shackles on his horse that he stole.
It might have been. The shackles he wore was because he would tell people he was atoning for his sins and past transgressions, so he had to feel pain.
That makes sense.
So during this time, when he was walking through the Siberian forest, he ran into a cult called the Callistes. These people would attend regular mass, but then would gather into the woods and have secret meetings. They believed that salvation can only be achieved through the purging of sin. They had a bizarre ritual where they would choke each other to the point of passing out, getting them high on asphyxiation.
It's asphyxiation.
Yeah,
but I mean...
sounds like a sleepover party.
Cleet, I've been bad. You need to strangle me.
Oh, Lord. They would speak in tongues and dance for long periods of time. They were extremely promiscuous, each member hooking up at a moment's notice and having large orgies in the forest.
Okay, so it starts with some gentle choking to absolve your sins, and then you start to dance, and then, okay, orgy. What would you do if you walked into a forest and saw that? Just a bunch of grown men choking each other, and then dancing, and then...
Some people, not me, would find that, hot. But remember, they don't bathe, so they stink.
Oh, you just had to bring that back up, didn't you?
Can I just say that, spreading the gospel was a little bit different back then?
Yeah, no thanks.
When he returned to his hometown, people would say his stare was so powerful that it cut to the core of you. He was still claiming he was seeing visions, and they were stronger, not from angels anymore, but God directly. He told his wife that he was going to use the basement to continue these meetings with the cult of Callistes.
Listen, honey, I need the basement for our meetings. We have these little choking sessions that we start with, and then we start to snuggle.
Yeah.
And then if our sins are absolved, just don't come downstairs, honey.
Whatever you hear, do not come downstairs. I mean, what would you do if your significant other just stopped bathing because of religious purposes?
And then started choking people that were bad. I'm not for it. I'm not for it.
So, it's hard to believe, but things get crazier from here.
They always do.
So, just as a side note, it's crazy to me how gullible people were back in during this time, right? I mean, we talked about life insurance policies and things like that where people would just cash out on other people all of the time. Whether or not Rasputin was lying or mentally ill, he told people that the Virgin Mary appeared to him in a dream and beckoned him to go to St. Petersburg to help the royal family. They were called the Romanov family. It just so happens that Makary was a former religious advisor to the Romanovs. He started using his connections to attract clientele from the nobles at the time. He claimed to have amazing powers of healing by just touching people.
Oh, so he's evolved from chokey to touch now.
Touchy.
Chokey to touchy.
This either worked or people just blindly believed him, and he got immensely popular amongst the public. People would travel all around Russia with the hopes of being healed from their afflictions. He eventually met with a high-level priest named Bishop Hemigan, and remember that name. They heard rumors of his miracles but were shocked when they first met him. He smelled because of his refusal to bathe, and he had a lack of upkeep. He soon garnered their respect as he can dilate his eyes, making them look fully black.
So he just looks, I just imagine like staring at you and like his face gets all serious and his eyes just start to go black. I'd get a little scared.
To me, that seems demonic.
Yeah, there's something else at play here.
So he wins them over with his healing power, and they believe that he's a prophet of God. They in turn introduce him to the royal family. He first became friends with Princess Milika and Anastasia of Montenegro. Again, I have trouble saying these names. I don't know, they're Russian. They were extremely interested in mysticism and the occult, and it is said they used this to marry into the royal family. They weren't treated well by the aristocracy, so they quickly became friends with Rasputin, being a peasant. One reason of this was because Rasputin never cared that the influential people thought of him. Because of this, they took him under their wing. Timing was good for Rasputin, as while his influence was at its peak amongst the aristocracy, Tsarina Alexandra Romanov, the Empress of Russia, had just lost her spiritual advisor. She was also a big believer in mysticism, thinking that her advisor had helped them conceive a child and a heir of their throne. They had kids before, but they were daughters and couldn't inherit the empire. Her advisor told her that she would meet another holy man soon to take his place.
Here comes Rasputin.
Amen. Seeing the opportunity, the Crow sisters, as they were called, introduced Rasputin to Tsar and Tsarina. The queen was very interested in picking him as the new spiritual advisor because of his healing abilities. It was found out that her son had hemophilia, which means his blood has trouble clotting. The chances of mortality are high, as even a small cut can lead to a major blood loss.
It's like you stub your toe and bleed to death.
I mean, that would suck. They kept this motive secret, however, to Rasputin. There was still some reservations because of his class. So, the story goes that her son was playing and fell and scraped his knee. Rasputin shows up shortly thereafter.
And choked the kneecap.
I hope not, God. That would have been the end of Rasputin. So he wanted to see the boy, claiming that he saw a vision, that if the boy didn't see him, that he would shortly die. They quickly let him in and was quickly to dismiss everyone from the room so that he could heal the boy. The timing again was interesting, as soon after the boy got better, convincing the royal family of his visions and healing power. So my question is this guy really healing people, or do people just think he's healing people?
He just pulled out a Band-Aid and he's like, here, little boy, put this on your kneecap, you're fine.
Because like even in today's time, there's people that say they heal people, but they're just like charlatans and people are just willing to blindly believe them.
Yeah. So like you said earlier, I mean, back then, right, people are extremely gullible. There's a reason nowadays people are so cautious. It had to happen at some point where you believed everything that you saw or heard. It's not that easy anymore because now someone can walk up and say, I have the power to heal. And everyone's like,
yeah,
sure.
Reddit will tear him down. But you never know. Maybe he did have the power of healing. Nobody knows. I mean, a lot of people did believe. After that, he was a regular visiting the royal family in their mansion. He would begin feeding the Tsar drugs like morphine and cocaine, claiming they would cure all of his ailments.
Dude, that sounds like an amazing Friday night.
Like, what kind of prophet is this guy? But I mean, he's smart because it seems like this was a strategy for them to become more hooked to Rasputin.
Yeah, he's creating an addiction.
Right. As the Tsar became more addicted to these drugs, he would want Rasputin to come more and more. So these visits became a weekly thing.
So in essence, Rasputin became a fabled drug dealer.
Yeah, pretty much. A drug dealer to the freaking high society of Russia.
Who chokes the sin out of you.
So with this new connection, he was able to secure enough money to get an apartment in St. Petersburg where he had many women come over for his rituals. He would stare vacantly while they would talk to each other. Then, out of nowhere, he would start mumbling quickly, and they would be quick to stop and listen, trying to decipher what he said.
Well, wouldn't you be kind of curious? Like you're talking to someone and someone in the corner's like, you're like, what the hell are you saying?
I mean, I don't want to be a jerk, but he just sounds like a drunk homeless man, like in the city.
But I mean, if you're walking down the city corner and you hear that, I mean, you'd probably be you might run away at that point. Like, I'm getting out of here.
Another thing you would do is you write on a piece of paper whatever came on his mind quickly, thinking they were important visions. They started to believe he was the second coming of Christ, this group of women, and they started quickly becoming a cult, only referring to him as God. Little fun fact, one of these women was married and left his husband to basically bang Rasputin.
Oh, that's cool. Well, that's what happens when you're a god.
So the authorities didn't like the fact that they had this strange cult growing amongst their city. They started to follow Rasputin around and discovered he's picking up prostitutes and taking them to the local bathhouse. Now, he wasn't bathing there because, he didn't bathe.
No, bathhouses weren't just bathing places. They were where you went to have a little bit of fun.
So when he got there, he would just start wailing on them with his fists and his belt as penance for their sins. He would then have sex with them and would leave the bathhouse. There was one time he was spotted leaving this house, and he was just screaming about demons inside his head. He was claiming that he could see the devil, and there was a civil war going inside his body, good against evil, battling for his soul.
Oh, that sounds like a trailer to a movie that I want to go see.
Yeah, I would watch it.
But so I'm curious. So he takes these girls to the bathhouse, beats the shit out of them, and then makes them good. And then he's like, okay, we can have sex now because you're not evil anymore. And then it sounds like he leaves with their demons.
I just think he was crazy as shit, and he was coked up or on heroin.
Oh, you think?
And tied with a mental illness, being smacked out, he was just saying whatever shit came to his head.
He's just balls to the wall at this point.
Soon in this town, word started spreading about how just crazy Rasputin was. Now, let's go back to Bishop Hermogen. He starts getting wind of Rasputin's antics of screaming at demons and beating up prostitutes, and is now feeling like his reputation is being tarnished because he was one of the original people that introduced him to St. Petersburg's high society. He ends up rounding up some of his friends to confront Rasputin. They bring a wooden crucifix and start beating the bejesus out of him, trying to kill him in the process. He ends up escaping in a bloody pulp and runs to the royal family like a bitch and tells them what happened.
No, this guy came and beat me up. He's so rude. Where's your belt? I need to choke the sins out of you.
I gotta beat up a prostitute. I'll be back.
Where's the nearest bathhouse?
Terrible man. I hope he dies in the end. They end up banishing Hermogen and his people associated to the crime outside of the country. It is at this time that Rasputin decides he is missing his home and decides to make a short pilgrimage back. Hermogen isn't done, however. He is convinced that Rasputin is the Antichrist and is using demon magic to cure people of their ailments. Frantic and a little bit desperate, he hires a disfigured prostitute named Kianya Giseva. She was a victim of one of her clients, whom had cut off her nose. After hearing about what Rasputin would do to prostitutes, it only took a little convincing and money to sign her on to this assassination plan. She ends up going to his hometown and finds his house and just sits and waits.
I'm gonna put this in here just because I'm a morbid person, but you said she's missing a nose. I wonder if the guy who cut off's like, got your nose.
Got your nose. Go grab it.
You gotta grab it. I got your nose. You want it back?
Rasputin eventually gets a telegram and starts leaving the house. He soon, however, notices a woman in his peripheral vision staring at him. He sees this as an opportunity and confronts her to spread the word of the gospel. It ends up being Kiana. She quickly starts stabbing him multiple times, and Rasputin falls to the ground. She wanted him dead so badly that she reached into his stomach and pulled out his intestines.
This is just after getting the shit kicked out of him by some other guys, too.
Yeah.
And she's just reaching in like, these are mine.
Dude, she had a lot of rage from her nose being cut off, man. She then ran, leaving him for dead. It was on this very day that Franz Ferdinand was assassinated and was the powder keg explosion that would ultimately start World War I. Rasputin was in his hospital when hearing the news of the possible upcoming war and wrote a letter to the Tsar pleading him not to go to the war. He wrote, "We will all drown in blood. The disaster is great, the misery infinite." The Tsar, however, didn't want to listen to Rasputin. People in Russia were rallying in the streets, cheering on the Tsar and wanting to fight for the glory of Russia.
Would you continue if you got a letter like that? Like, the streets will be full of blood.
Well, back then, man, you had advisors that were supposed to have, like, mythical power, and that's just how they spoke.
Yeah. And if you got the whole town cheering you on, like, yeah, let's go to war.
I'd fucking
You're going to go to war.
I'd be like, let's go fight those
Like,
bitches.
I don't give a shit about the streets running with blood. They're going to run with blood for my enemies.
Kick ass. Tsar left the palace and went to go fight with his soldiers, which I think is pretty badass. After healing from his wounds, Rasputin went back to the palace to advise the empress.
You mean healing from his intestines coming out? Like, how did he just tuck him back in and stitch himself closed?
How do you not die from that? That's crazy.
Okay, so obviously this is the episode of people who won't fucking die. I mean, Michael Malloy had survived all this poison, but he's like stuffing his intestines back into his stomach. These guys are incredible.
I bet that prostitute is pissed. So during the time of the war, he becomes very influential, filling a lot of the important Russia government roles with his friends. Being that he nor his friends are savvy in politics, they are very incompetent in their roles. During this time, Russia is being devastated by World War I. Millions of Russian troops died in the war. The economy's in the shitter. Jobs were scarce and inflation was rampant. The Russian people saw that the Empress was letting a madman run the country and started demanding a revolution. It was at this time that Rasputin's health was going down, and he was having trouble healing people.
Well, he can't even heal himself.
Well, I disagree. I mean, he's still fucking alive. So this is proof of Rasputin's ability to have precognition. He wrote in his journal that he was going to die soon, and he was at peace with that. He also states that God was going to sacrifice someone so Russia could become a prosperous country again. He wrote a letter to the Empress saying, "If one of your relations brings upon my death, then none of your family will remain alive for more than 2 years. They will be killed by the Russian people. Tell your relatives that I have paid for them with my blood. I shall be killed. I'm no longer among the living. Pray and be strong."
Good God, that's a loaded letter. Take that, Empress.
Yeah, I mean, if I were her and she believed in what he was saying, I bet she was pretty afraid.
I mean, he's not a guy to mess with at this point in time. I mean, he's building kind of a reputation around him at this point.
He's a charismatic fellow
who chokes the sin out of prostitutes.
Let's introduce a new player here. This is where Tsarina's nephew comes in, and his name is Felix Yusupov. He is one of the many people that want Rasputin dead. His wife's name is Irina, and she's considered to be one of the most beautiful people in St. Petersburg. It is widely rumored amongst the people that Yusupov is a bisexual and that he and his wife were swingers.
Ooh, swingers.
Wow. Yusupov used this to his advantage to tell Rasputin that his wife has gone too far and is suffering from a sex addiction.
There are worse things to suffer from.
He pleaded with Rasputin that he needed help healing the demons inside her.
I wonder what methods he's going to use for this one because...
His dick. He picks up Rasputin with his friends and drives to his mansion. They go to the basement that was set up to look like there was a party there the night before. The room had drinks and decadent hors d'oeuvres everywhere. They tell him that Irina is upstairs entertaining some party guests and would be down shortly. They told him to feel free to eat and drink while they wait. The food and drinks, unbeknownst to Rasputin, were laced with cyanide, and the trap was designed to kill him. 2.5 hours later, he had gorged himself to kill multiple men. Yusupov is amazed that Rasputin hasn't dropped dead. He started thinking that the demonic rumors of the cleric were true, and that the poison wouldn't be enough to kill him. He decides to go upstairs and grab his fucking gun. Once coming back down, he points it at Rasputin. Rasputin doesn't even wince. He just stares at him with his ungodly stare. Yusupov shoots him, and Rasputin falls to the ground. The men cheer, and they all go upstairs to celebrate and drink.
Yeah, but this is where the double tap rule comes in.
I feel like this is where like every like scary movie starts. You know, you fucking shoot him. You're like, yeah, okay, let's go.
Well, it's usually they shoot him in like a kneecap. It's like, oh, he's dead. Let's go drink and have sex. Nothing's wrong with this.
Woo!
And then he comes up and strangles the shit out of every single one of you in the fucking action.
So, during this celebration, Yusupov gets a terrible feeling in the pit of his stomach.
As he should.
Something just isn't feeling right. He decides to go downstairs to double check that Rasputin is dead. He goes to feel his pulse when Rasputin jumps up and somehow escapes through the corridor outside. Yusupov and his friends, however, quickly catch up to him. Yusupov shoots Rasputin point blank in the head, and his friends start shooting at him with reckless abandonment.
Oh my god. That's like gangster execution style. Like
Rasputin falls to the ground, and they grab his mangled body and put him in the trunk of their car. They drive to the local river and shoved his body in the hole in the ice. Authorities later found his body and described his hands were up like he was pressing against the ice. There was also water in his lungs, suggesting that he was still breathing before going under the ice.
Nah, he was just thirsty.
The town was so convinced that he would come back to life that they ended up burning his body. Everything but one bit of his body. Can you guess what?
His penis.
Yep, it was his dick.
Was it really?
Yeah.
No way.
So his penis is still on display in the Museum of St. Petersburg.
You're full of shit. They don't have Rasputin's penis on display.
If this podcast ever takes off, we are going to go there and fucking see Rasputin's dick.
I don't know if I want to see that. See, I was just dicking around. Wah, wah.
Soon after his death, Rasputin's prophecy came to life. During the Bolshevik Revolution, the entire Romanov family was executed. And that ends the story of Rasputin. Was he a tool of God or of the devil? Was he really able to help heal people and predict the future? Or was he just some crazy hobo that got power?
I don't know. I mean, it might be a skosh of both. We never know. But, I mean, I don't know. This has been one of my favorite episodes recording. You had two men that just wouldn't die. I mean, they both ingested a shit ton of poison. They're just like, oh, whatever. This is insane.
It reminds me of that episode of Austin Powers where the guy just doesn't fucking die.
Yeah, when he drops down like the...
Oh, I broke my leg. Let me just go stand up. Oh, my God.
It's like the fire pit comes up and, oh, my God, I need to watch that movie again. Yeah, this is insane, though. I mean, those two men, it was not their time to go.
Well, guys, I think this wraps us up for tonight.
I think it does. I mean, it's been a pretty interesting topic to cover. I mean, those few men in the world who've been so invincible.
I mean, it's almost like a curse, though. The pain and the agony that they went through just to fucking die.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, it's not like they lived a life of luxury. They were being poisoned and shot and run over by cars and...
God, let me die.
Just, yeah, at that point in time, you're like, I wish I could die. We're all sitting here like, oh, I'm kind of jealous. And they're like, no, I want to die at this point in time. But regardless, guys, thank you so much for joining us again. It's been an absolute pleasure recording these episodes. And thank you so much for listening. We absolutely appreciate all the support we're getting, all the listens. We really love you guys.
If you like us, the best thing you can do is like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next time.